The goal of our presentation is to clearly explain why universities should be required to teach computer science students an ethical approach to computing rather than just a technical one. As technology impacts society at a constantly increasing rate, the need for more computer ethics content in computer science curricula continues to grow. Our world has become increasingly automated. We turn to algorithms and AI to answer real questions and predict real outcomes. While computing may seem to be inherently fair and unbiased, computers are just systems of zeros and ones after all. Computer programs operating in the real world are not. Over the past few years, AI and algorithmic systems have been increasingly criticized for perpetuating biases, reinforcing discrimination, and heightening existing inequalities in our society. An abundance of research has emerged proving that automated design making or decision-making software exhibits gender and racial biases. In computer systems, especially artificial intelligence, data in equals data out, meaning that the output of such programs is based on the input. Since the input is often real-world data, systems are trained using data sets that reflect human biases, including their judgments, priorities, and values. In short, automated systems replicate and amplify existing patterns in society.
There are multiple examples of biased AI systems. A few years ago, Amazon attempted to automate recruiting by building a system that filtered through resumes to recommend the best candidates. It was trained on the past 10 years of Amazon resumes, which were mainly from male applicants, as tech was even more of a male-dominated field back then. As a result, the algorithm learned to favor males. It penalized resumes that included the term women's and downgraded applicants from all female universities. This demonstrates how the automated system learned from previous bias. Since then, Amazon has worked to develop AI systems that are focused more on diversity. Machine learning has also been used to predict crime. Predpol is a company that analyzes previous crime data to predict boxed areas where crime is likely to occur. Predpol allows officers to report crime so that the algorithm can continue to learn about crime patterns. Although Predpol sounds effective in theory, many are concerned about its potential to reinforce existing biases, disproportionately policing low-income communities. The system utilizes racially biased data, and officers deployed to those areas will report more crime and contribute to the loop of supporting that those are high crime areas.
In the US and internationally, there have been some recent and ongoing efforts to develop ethical governance standards regarding AI based on principles that interpret fairness. But even with governmental efforts, there are difficulties in defining and measuring fairness. Laws will not necessarily be able to mitigate and resolve certain implicit or unconscious biases that can be baked into algorithms. It will not always be possible to satisfy all notions of fairness at all times, and companies must be aware that there is no simple metric of fairness that software engineers can apply. Fairness is a human, not mathematical determination, and so it's important for the algorithmic decision to involve human input. And of course, those providing input should be well-versed in the ethics of computer science and how their algorithms design may or may not uphold those principles. There is increasingly more demand from students and faculty to implement ethical requirements into their college's computer science programs. The Cornell Daily Sun themselves claim that Cornell's computer science undergraduates are woefully underprepared for careers in tech, referencing the Silicon Valley approach of expeditiously developing while only considering major issues such as algorithmic discrimination as an afterthought. The authors of the article note that Cornell's computer science major has no ethical requirements, and that the presumption is that liberal studies requirements are expected to fill the gaps of knowledge. However, they express that such requirements hardly support intellectual exploration, let alone target key interdisciplinary gaps in a curriculum. Duke's computer science major also does not require taking a course in computing ethics. We have ethical inquiry requirements, but those can be covered by courses not directly tied to understanding biases in the context of software engineering, design, and development. CS 342 would fulfill an EI requirement, but it is not required course for the major, and even if it were, discussing algorithmic bias is not its main focus.
Ultimately, more than 70% of software engineers have some degree in computer science, meaning that those studying CS in college will account for the majority of engineers that create and deploy algorithms into the world. While colleges do an excellent job at creating proficient coders who are technically prepared to enter the workplace, they fail to create what we actually need, ethical coders. This is in part because colleges rarely teach CS students that algorithms are unfair. Instead, we're taught that the reason algorithmic outputs aren't always correct is because computers can't account for everything. As a result, we tend to treat algorithmic bias as error and see algorithms with small margins of error as good enough. However, if CS students were taught that algorithms aren't always fair and errors in algorithmic outputs may actually be biases perpetuated from our world, then they will be able to make more ethical decisions about the algorithms they create. They'll be able to determine if an algorithm's margin of bias is really worth the impact it can have on real people. Ultimately, colleges should require computer science majors to take at least one course that explores the ethical impacts of algorithms in computing. If those who create technology have a clear understanding of how algorithms perpetuate injustices in our society before they enter the workplace, then we can begin to build more ethical technology that accounts for the members of all members of society. Thank you.